Purdue picks up a massive win, 80-77 in overtime in Lincoln, Nebraska, a top 10 road win. We are recording almost right after that win. We paused for a quick intermission to watch the Illinois game ending, which was a fantastic game. Shout out Wisconsin, shout out Nick Boyd and John Blackwell for evening up Purdue and Illinois in the standings. I've had a couple dirty martinis, and I'm here to recap that Purdue Nebraska game with Ethan. Ethan, that was fun. I enjoyed that. I almost had a heart attack. I think I feel like I'm 40 now. Initial thoughts on that game. What was that?
Look, I pride myself on being a level-headed analyst who doesn't get too emotional watching games. Enjoys myself for sure. You don't want to take the fun out of sports, but when you lose, you got to come back and talk about why. When you win, you can't get too excited because you got to hop on here and talk about why. This game took multiple years off my life. Oh boy, this was rough. I said in the preview, you and I were just talking off air here a second ago. I said in the preview that, tough, close loss in Lincoln is nothing to hang your head about. It's more the spot where Purdue really feels like they needed a big win. And while that's still true in a vacuum, Purdue needed this based on how they started the game. They were up 14-1 almost instantly. They felt like they couldn't miss. Braden and Fletch were like 4 for 5 combined from 3 in like 2.5 minutes, and Nebraska couldn't hit a shot. And then they go to the half up 16. They come out of the second half and hit a couple of shots to go up 22. Losing that game would have been brutal, and credit to Purdue, they found a way to close it out.
Yeah, I mean, and now they found a way to close it out. They found a way to win this game while going on the road to Lincoln, Nebraska, playing a top 10 team, playing a team that we said is going to try and just go execution for execution. And Purdue went out and shot 13 for 46 from three. That's 28%, and 11 for 20 from the free throw line. That's 55%. And found a way to win this game because they held Nebraska to 1.01 points per possession and out rebounded them by a massive 54-37 margin. This Purdue team won on the margins. They won doing little things, and that's a massive step that wasn't quite expecting this Purdue team to take, especially in this game. I mean, this was one of the toughest spots of the season. You're going to a top 10 team that theoretically exploits a lot of weaknesses that you have, and you found a way to grit out a win doing what you do best at a pretty low level for your standards, I think.
Yeah, I mean, like you said, if you had told me Purdue 28% from 3 in this game, I would have said that doesn't surprise me. How much did we lose by? But what really did surprise me was who took those shots. I mean, you and I kind of went over it in the recap how good, or the preview, how good Nebraska's defense is at denying shots to the guys they don't want taking shots. And they really let Purdue's 3 starting guards tee off from 3. CJ Cox, Braden Smith, and Fletcher Lawyer, they combined for 36 3-point attempts out of Purdue's 46. Obermeyer, Jack Benner, Jakari Harris all went 1 for 3 from 3, all perfectly in sync. And Trey Coffin-Rent took a very weird 3-pointer that he probably didn't need to take. Maybe thought there was less time on the shot clock than there actually was. The bulk of Purdue's 3-point attempts came from the guys they wanted taking those shots on pretty good looks. Other than a couple of Braden and Fletcher, like contested pull-up heat check type shots, CJ had a deep, like late shot clock one once or twice, but they got the guys they wanted shooting those shots. And to Purdue for winning in other ways because their shot was not what won in this game.
Yeah, I mean, quite frankly, I legitimately think like Purdue could have won this game by 15, even the way that last kind of 10-minute stretch went, because this team got a bunch of looks for really good shooters that were pretty wide open. Like, of Fletcher's 17 threes, I think 3 or 4 of them weren't fantastic looks, but I mean, and even those 3 or 4 weren't shots that I hated Fletcher taking, and the other like 13 were wide open. and he still only went like 3 for 13. And I think credit to Purdue for finding another way to win. And I think it was on the glass. And with that being said, I think it starts with Trey Kaufman-Renn. Like Oscar Clough earned a Ken Palm MVP in this game. He had 12 and 14. Trey Kaufman-Renn had 6 and 19. And like for as much as we noticed Oscar Clough on the glass, Trey Kaufman-Renn was an animal tonight on the boards. Nebraska's bigs had nothing for it, and you couple that with a team and a scheme that I think has been kind of in the past, like a scheme like that is able to frustrate Trey Kaufman-Renn when he's not able to get a bunch of shots up and he starts to force things and maybe his energy drops. And in this game, there was no forcing anything. He hit a couple of very timely, tough floaters, and credit to Trey Kaufman-Renn because he's that level of scorer and he made the shots. But other than that, he was willing to keep the ball moving. He didn't force anything on offense, and on the glass, he was the best player on the floor and dominated his way to a Purdue win. Quite frankly, I legitimately think Trey Kaufman-Renn was the best player on the floor tonight, and it was largely because of his rebounding.
Yeah, I mean, Trey was awesome. I said this could be triple double watch for Trey. It was triple double watch for another player we'll get to here in a minute, but um, I also said points might be the hardest for him to come by. Now, he only ended up with 2 assists. He had a lot of kickoff passes that didn't go down. He very easily could have had 6 or 7 assists in this game if a slightly more average shooting night for Purdue, but 19 rebounds, just absurd. Trey Kaufman-Renn and Oscar Clough combined for 33 rebounds, just the two of them. Nebraska had 37 as a team. No Nebraska player had more than 6 rebounds, and that was Rink Mast, although like their entire lineup had 5. It was a very balanced mediocre rebounding night for Nebraska there. Just absolute dominance. Those guys were unstoppable. 21 offensive rebounds for Purdue, 6 for Nebraska. When you dominate the offensive glass like that, you have your plus 15 on the offensive glass. That is huge. Purdue had fewer turnovers as well, 3 fewer turnovers. That is 18 more possessions that Purdue generated for their offense, and that's what carries you through bad shooting nights. I've gotten on here on this channel on this show before and said that Purdue's vulnerable in March sometimes because if their shot isn't falling, they don't necessarily have like they don't have like a pressure defense that forces turnovers. They don't play super fast. And if the rebounding advantage isn't there, all of a sudden, all the ways you generate extra looks and provide yourself insurance against off shooting nights aren't there. When Purdue's playing like this is how you beat top teams in a hostile environment when your shot's not falling. And quite frankly, that's something we really hadn't seen from Purdue at all this year. And it's a huge positive sign for their March success. They're able to do it in a place like this.
Yeah, I mean, it was really impressive. I mean, and Pinnacle Bank is a very hostile atmosphere. Like that's not an easy
Oh,
environment
yeah.
to go into, and just credit to Purdue for finding a way to win despite the shooting performance. Like I can't reiterate that enough. The ability to win on the margins is huge, especially come March, and the ability to do that to a top 10 team on the road is even bigger. And I think just I don't want to say raises his team's floor because I do think that like it's hard to say raises his team's floor in a week where we saw them beat Oregon by 4 and trail with 2 minutes left. But it's almost a floor raising capability if they can show this consistently over the last month of the season to be able to win games like that. Like that's a gritty win, and that propels you through a brutal shooting night against a I don't know, Purdue's trending towards like a 2 seed right now, and with that they'll probably see a 7 or a 10 seed. You have a brutal shooting night against a 7 or a 10 seed. This version of Purdue is able to win that game.
Yeah, and we mentioned the recap or the preview. Nebraska's not an offensive rebounding team. They're one of the worst offensive rebounding teams in the country, partly because they don't have the personnel for it, and partly because they do not prioritize getting on the offensive glass. They really run back hard to prevent transition opportunities. So they weren't going to be aggressive attacking Purdue's bigs, on the glass on the offensive end. But when Purdue was on the offensive end, Nebraska's a good rebounding team. They're not a great defensive rebounding team, but they are a good one. And Purdue had gone up against some average to bad defensive rebounding teams in recent weeks and really struggled to generate offensive rebounds and second chance points. And because like this is what Purdue was doing to teams early in the season. I mean, this brings back memories of Alabama and Texas Tech games where Trey Kaufman-Renn and Oscar Clough were single-handedly matching teams' rebounding numbers. And like you said, these are the sorts of games that those two are going to have if Purdue is having an off shooting night, because that's where Purdue gains their edge, right? Even in a game where Purdue played pretty good defense, it wasn't perfect. And their defense alone didn't win them this game. Their offensive rebounding did, and their ability to end Nebraska's possessions on the other end as well. But I think we've gone far enough without talking about the man who almost had a triple double in 40 minutes. Braden Smith had 13 points, 10 assists, 8 rebounds, 2 steals, and a block. He was so close to 2 or 3 more steals where the ball was just off his fingertips or his foot was just on the line. He was playing with such competitive energy to the point where Matt Painter had to, after Braden was checked back into the game with 2 fouls with about 3 minutes left in the first half, Painter had to pull him back out of the game after Braden nearly picked up his 3rd foul diving after a loose ball. That's the energy that the rest of this team feeds off of. And what do you think of our point guard there?
Yeah, I mean, again, he kind of embodied the Purdue ability to win tonight. Didn't have a great shooting night. He was 2 for 6 from 2-point range, 3 for 9 from 3. That's 5 for 15 from the field. So 13 points on 15 shots. Really bad shooting night for his standards, but 10 assists, 8 boards, only 1 turnover, 2 steals, and a block. He was everywhere. He caused a lot of problems for Nebraska defensively, and when he wasn't forcing turnovers, I thought he was just straight up playing good defense. Like, he was matched up with some good ball handlers and Jamarcus Lawrence and Sam Hoiberg for most of this game, and he didn't give them anything. Like, Hoiberg, I think so recently I've seen Hoiberg be able to like get downhill and feed to shooters against other teams. And there was none of that in this game. Like, Hoiberg really never got going in that sense. And he ended up with 5 assists. A lot of them came late in that stretch run. I thought Braden was great defensively. He took care of the ball after a weird kind of stretch where Braden hasn't taken care of the ball in a great way. And he also, like everybody else tonight, rebounded the hell out of the ball and really chipped in several times with some timely rebounds, helping out Trey and Oscar, I think, on some possessions where they had position, were able to get a tip out, and Braden was the one who was able to secure the ball and not a Nebraska player. And it was big in helping to end possessions and limit offensive rebounds, and I think really helped Oscar and Trey tonight too when they battled for position and earned a rebound that they weren't able to secure themselves.
Yeah, I mean, Braden quality game. I mean, 13, 8, and 10 with two steals and a block is just an insane stat line. He taking 15 shots, was 5 for 15 from the floor. That mid-range fadeaway, they were really crowding him on some of those shots, and it really felt like he went to that a lot down the stretch when Purdue's offense was stagnant and it just wasn't really falling. Even still, though, he found ways to impact the game. Barely came off the floor. I'm not sure he came off the floor at all in the second half or overtime. Don't remember him coming off the floor. Can't fact check that live here, but on the Nebraska side, part of what made Kaufman-Renn and Clough's performance so impressive to me was I thought the 2 best Nebraska players were their starting front court. Rank Mast and Burke Buchtengel had phenomenal games in their own right. Mast had 18, 6, and 7. Just absurd efficiency and playmaking from him. He was really quite good. And then Buchtengel only had 5 points. He played 24 minutes. They went small a lot to try and spread Purdue out. But he had 5 rebounds, 2 steals, and a block. He was really active defensively. Thought he caused a lot of problems for Purdue when he was switching or just kind of causing some havoc in the paint on the defensive end, especially down the stretch when Purdue's offense really went cold and allowed Nebraska to get back in that game. Just, again, impressive that Purdue's was so physical against those guys. A pretty good front court for Nebraska that even as guys like Hoiberg and Sanford and Lawrence didn't have their best nights, those guys kind of stepped up, but were still outplayed by Purdue's starting duo.
Yeah, I mean, and a lot of that, again, like a lot of this came down the stretch of the second half. Like, the reason Purdue was able to build such a good lead is because their Purdue's front court completely neutralized Nebraska's front court. And Mast was having a rough game. He hit a few threes towards the end and had a few nice passes that I think really helped his stat line. But I mean, if you looked at like the first 30 to 35 minutes of this game, this Purdue front court neutralized Rink Mast. They dealt with Berke Buchensel. I mean, he didn't really have a ton of production, and obviously, up until the last 5 to 10 minutes or so of regulation, didn't really affect the game a ton, even defensively. I mean, Purdue was kind of getting what they wanted anyway. And I mean, they came up big down the stretch for sure for Nebraska, but credit to this Purdue front court because they were able to just take this Nebraska front court out of the game for large stretches, even in a game where you kind of felt like they played well.
Yeah. Yeah. I was impressed with Purdue's front court defensively as well. You know, there were a few times where Clough was a step slow getting out to the perimeter and giving up some open looks. But for the most part, I thought Trey did a good job of staying in front of his man and switching on the perimeter. Those guys were banging in the paint a lot and holding their ground. Just overall, a really good game from the starting front court. Fletcher Lawyer, on the other hand, 18 points, 4 for 17 from three. How do you feel about Fletch getting up 17 moving threes?
I'm kind of speechless. Like this is one of the more unique stat lines I think you'll read in college basketball. 18 points on 17 3-point attempts is one of the more inefficient nights I think I've ever heard of.
18
I
points,
mean,
just to read it off here. 18 points, 5 for 20 from the floor, 4 for 17 from three, 4 for 5 from the free throw line, 3 rebounds, 3 assists, a steal, 1 turnover.
I mean, this is a guy who made 4 free throws, got to 18 points. If I told you Fletcher Lawyer made 4 free throws and attempted 17 threes, how many points do you think he would have scored?
Made 4 free throws, shot 17 threes. Probably in the 28 to 35 range.
Right, like we're talking Fletch 30 ball, Fletch masterclass, and for a second I thought that's what we were gonna get. Like it's what it looked like off out of the gate. But I mean, I think there was I was talking about it. I was texting, I think you throughout the game a little bit, like, damn, this Purdue team needs to make a few of these wide open threes because they need to put this game away. I know it feels like it's 16. I know it feels like it's over, but it's not. There's still a lot of basketball left to be played. And like this Purdue team has had an inability to put teams away this year. Like hit a couple of those, hit those big threes down the stretch. Like that lead gets to 25 in the first half. That game probably never gets close in the second half, I don't think. And it sucks. I mean, it felt like Fletcher was coming over this hump of like bad shooting nights, and he had a couple of good ones against Oregon and Maryland, but just couldn't put it in the bucket tonight. But other than that, like I think he was good defensively. I didn't notice a bunch of bad Fletch moments. 3 rebounds, 3 assists, 1 turnover feels like about as much as you can ask from him in the other aspects of this game. So I think all in all, this was like again, like a Fletcher found ways to lead by example and kind of find ways to win without making shots, even though this only 4 of the 17 threes went down. And, I'll never hate Fletcher volume. Like he's an elite 3-point shooter, even if he does miss a few from time to time. Like, please give me Fletcher Lawyer 17 attempt games, especially when they're all as good a looks as he got tonight.
Yeah, I really never felt like he was forcing him. And honestly, maybe in the preview, he should have been a little more anticipatory of those Fletch sidestep, like pump fake sidestep threes. I mean, he got that shot whenever he wanted it in this game because Nebraska was setting one guy at him. They were never doubling him, and they fly to your shot. They are not going to let a shot go up that's not heavily contested by someone screaming at you as they run full speed. And just a little pump fake sidestep with the guy whiz by, take the shot. I mean, he had that whenever he wanted it, and oftentimes was the best shot Purdue could generate on a possession. I'll say about the Nebraska defense, they switched this to in the last 10 minutes of the game and then into overtime. They did not run the defense I thought they would run for the first 30 minutes of this game. And I think that's part of why Purdue was getting so many looks for Braden, for Fletch, and to an extent for CJ as well. And even Clough was getting some easy looks around the bucket. they were playing pretty much straight up man to man. They weren't aggressively doubling Braden. They weren't flying two or three guys into the paint when Purdue would get to their bigs, and it let Purdue just kind of run their offense.
To me there was a weird like attempt to just keep guys off the baseline, and in doing that they completely vacated the top of the key at times. Like as soon as Purdue ran an action towards one side, you saw this a lot during the beginning of the game. They ran this action all the time. It was like they'd set a ball screen for Braden at the top of the key. He'd get to the wing, the big would roll. Usually it was Clough. It'd clear out the top of the key, and Nebraska would like send all of their guys to the strong side of the floor, completely vacate the weak side, completely vacate the top of the key, and Purdue just replaced that action with a shooter, whether it was CJ, whether it was Braden, whether it was Fletcher. And they missed quite a few good looks on this action, but it was like whichever shooter they wanted to essentially got a wide open look at the top of the key from three. And it happened so often it felt intentional from Nebraska, and quite frankly I don't know exactly why they did that, because I haven't noticed that in a lot of Nebraska games before. Like they think that was a wrinkle thrown in for this Purdue team, and I think PJ and the offensive staff correctly realized like if we run this action over and over again, the way Nebraska's guarding this is going to end up with a lot of just wide open threes. And I think it also helped at times. There were especially some plays early in the first half where like Price Sanford just completely fell asleep off ball, like far side of the floor, and you see him, and it's like all of a sudden you see CJ Cox catching a pass at the top of the key wide open, and Price is still fighting over a screen on the wing from Oscar Clough screening away, and just felt like he was late to react to action. And I think Purdue did a good job of making all five guys on Nebraska guard, and I think kind of exposed a little bit of weakness in Nebraska's ability to guard the weak side of the ball when you're able to beat them with skip passes and stuff like that.
Yeah. Yeah, this was, I think, going to be a game that teams scout Nebraska's defense for moving forward, because Purdue was getting in some ways I fully didn't expect. It just felt like a departure from what they typically run, and they ran the defense that I've seen them run all season, the one that Hoiberg typically runs, even in past years with worse personnel, the one that in theory gives Purdue the worst matchup prop, like it gives Nebraska the advantage in the matchups, and it worked for like the last 15 minutes of this game. They were hard hedging up top on the ball handler. They were throwing two guys at Braden, forcing the ball out of his hands. They were collapsing hard in the paint.
I think the switch there is they just made a lot more of an effort than they usually do to make a ball handler uncomfortable as far away as they did for Braden. Like typically they don't hard hedge like that because they're willing to let you get to like the 17-foot mark before they actually start to swarm you. And I think like they played pretty true to that, I think, for the beginning stretch of the game. But Braden is just such a good passer, and Purdue runs such good offense and has good enough shooters that I think they were perfectly content to run their stuff at 21 feet from the rim. And Nebraska's defense is kind of designed to let you do that. And I think the switch came when like all of a sudden you saw out of a timeout Rink Mass hard hedge Braden, and it ended up with a deflection off of Nebraska, I think, that went back to Purdue. But it was like the hard hedge, I think, threw Purdue off a little bit, and it wasn't exactly what they prepared for against Nebraska. And I think that was the wrinkle that kind of caused Purdue some issues. You saw them go to that 1-3-1 late that caused Purdue some issues. It really forced Purdue's action away from the basket. There was obviously in the 1-3-1, there was a more drastic attempt to just leave the weak side corner and like keep a guy in the middle at all times. And with that, Purdue, I think, stopped moving as well as they did off ball because they read the zone and try to just kind of find their spots and move the ball. And that's where you saw Nebraska kind of come back on their run.
The 1-3-1 definitely threw Purdue for a loop. And the thing with zones is that it can be pretty, I don't want to say finicky or fluky, but sometimes it's just sort of like, do you make your threes or not?
Right. It completely takes you out of your offense because your normal offense just doesn't work against a zone. The zone principles are completely different than man. And, you can run a down screen against zone all you want. The
No one's
guy on the
moving.
bottom's not going to chase it. I promise. He's not. He's just going to stay there. So
And a one three
it's
one in particular is tough for Purdue because that takes away a lot of like the short roll, Trey Kaufman
right.
Ren playmaking from the lane because you have the guy standing right there and then another guy right under the rim. So it takes away a lot of Purdue's typical like 2-3 zone breaker defense looks, which is get Trey the ball around the free throw line and kick it to whatever shooter they're not guarding. And or
Exactly.
if they're going to guard him one-on-one, they're not going to bring another guy over. He can go score very easily. The 1-3-1 puts two guys on Trey in that situation with one standing right where he wants to get to, and it forces the action around the perimeter. And Purdue is basically just passing the ball around the perimeter until a guy had an open enough look to take the shot.
And not only just passing the ball around the perimeter, it was essentially like from wing to wing. There was no really getting the ball to the corner, which is the hole in that 1-3-1. And I think like credit to Nebraska because I think it was a pretty well ran 1-3-1, and I think there were some I think there were reasons why Purdue couldn't get it to the corner, and those reasons were Nebraska executed their 1-3-1 pretty well. So I will
Yeah.
say that like credit to Nebraska's defense being able to execute that late game stretch, and credit to Hoiberg for preparing that and going to that down the stretch. I think they probably should have gone to it earlier, and it might have ended up in a Nebraska win. But regardless, that's not what happened. Purdue won, and thankfully for that. Let's talk a little bit about CJ Cox, though. We've talked about the other four starters. CJ didn't have his loudest game, I don't think. He had 11 points, but that was on 13 shots. He, much like Fletcher, was not the most efficient from three. Went 3 for 10 from 3 point range, and 0 for 2 from the free throw line. Missed a couple of big ones late. Had 2 rebounds, 3 assists, just 1 turnover, 1 steal. But the story of him was how good he was on Price Sanford for this game. Held Price Sanford to 0 points in the first half, and really just was excellent in not giving Price an inch of space. There was never really a chance for Price to get a clean look at all. He got a couple shots off in the first half, but they like one of them was a late shot clock, barely hit, ball barely touched his hands before he got it up three, and CJ was all over him the entire time. Just kind of you got what you got from CJ. He hit a couple of huge ones late. Really didn't hit another shot other than those three. And outside of that, played excellent defense though, and I think was kind of an unheralded reason for why Purdue won this game.
I was impressed with both CJ and Jakari in this game. I thought both of them played really, really defense. They were sticking over screens. They were really making life difficult on Nebraska's, catch and shoot guys, whether it was Sanford or Lawrence or Hoiberg. They were sticking to their guys, and offensively they were taking their shots. Jakari was shooting very confidently. He had a dribble pull up, free throw line extended kind of look that went down, and went 1 for 3 from three, as I mentioned. But yeah, I mean, CJ, we kind of talked this in the preview. Like, this is probably going to be a game where CJ got a lot of looks from three because they'd be, it's giving Purdue's other starters a little bit more attention. And his shot didn't go down. If 3 for 10, that's about what he's been in conference play, around 30% from three. And you obviously want him to be shooting better. The two missed free throws were absolutely brutal. Sidebar on Purdue's free throw shooting in general being absolutely 55% from the free throw line, 11 for 20. Purdue gave away multiple chances to ice this game and seal it before the end of regulation, missed free throws. But then again, Nebraska did too with Mast on the end one. So anyway, yes, I mean, CJ, I thought his defense was good. Missed his shot, but I mean, otherwise, he kind of did everything he asked him to.
Yeah, I mean, I think this was almost like a starter versus starter game. I mean, you look at Purdue's rotation and the five starters. Fletcher Loyer played 41 minutes. Braden played 40, and that's with foul trouble. Trey Kaufman played 36, and that's with foul trouble. CJ played 30. Oscar Clough played 30. The only guy off the bench that played more than 13 minutes was Jack Benner, who played 19, and that was largely because of some small ball stuff down the stretch. And I think this was a game about starters versus starters, and quite frankly, Purdue starters, I think, won this game doing the little things, and in a game where neither team really hit shots. I think like Purdue shot 13 for 46, which is really not good at all. Nebraska shot 12 for 32 from three, which ended up being 38%, but really didn't hit many shots for most of this game. They really hit a few big ones late that make that the percentage a little better and were the reason this game got pushed to overtime. But the reason Purdue was able to open up such a big lead was in part because Nebraska didn't shoot all that well, and part of that was Purdue's defense. But in a game where neither team shot particularly well, in a game that we thought would come down to whose offense executed better, Purdue won this game because of defensive and rebounding, and I think that's important to note. But like, I don't think there was a ton that you really got from either bench. I don't think there was a ton of bad necessarily. I just think it was a lot of starter minutes, and with that, there's not much left to talk about. I do kind of think I would like to talk about going forward a little bit. I think big picture, it makes sense to do this now, especially with that Illinois loss tonight. This Purdue team now sits 20-4 overall. They are 10-3 in the Big Ten. They are now, I believe, tied with everybody in the Big Ten in the loss column outside of Michigan, who is sitting there with one loss, but they still have to welcome Michigan to Mackey Arena. This Purdue team plays at Iowa and then goes Michigan, Indiana, and Michigan State at home in one of the tougher stretches that you'll see from anybody all year around the entire country. Sorry, not conference, country. Um, how big was this win for Purdue? I think. Do you think going forward in a stretch that 4-0 would certainly be nice in the next four games coming up? That's for sure.
This game was massive. I mean, you had to win this game if you're Purdue. The way it started, you after losing three in a row, you've now won three in a row, and what was probably your toughest game left, or at least your second toughest, depending on how much better you think Michigan is than Nebraska. Um, you've won. You and I were talking offline right before we hit record. This next game at Iowa is going to be incredibly difficult for Purdue, and we'll break that down in the preview. That'll be coming out later this week, so stay tuned for that. But yeah, I mean, Purdue goes at Iowa, against Michigan, against Indiana, against Michigan State, at Ohio State, at Northwestern, home versus Wisconsin to close the year. I mean, that is a really, really tough 7 game stretch to close the season. But the second toughest game in that stretch, you just won. And not only did you win, you had a massive double digit lead in the second half. They erased that lead, got you to go to overtime, and you still closed it out. Like, that's a big confidence boost. In all three of Purdue's losses in conference play, they had double digit first half leads and were unable to close out the game. You don't love to see that lead erased again, but at least this time, even though the lead was erased, Nebraska claimed the lead in overtime. They righted the ship, steadied themselves, got the win. This is pretty massive.
Yeah, and now you look at this four-game stretch with a little bit of a different luster, I think, because you look and you see an Iowa team next that, yeah, they gave you a game and it was tough in Mackey Arena, but you feel like you didn't play all that well, and I think you still won that game against Iowa already, and you get them a second time. But I think if you're Purdue, you look at that Iowa team and you say, we can beat you. We can go to Carver Hawkeye and win that game. That is a very winnable game. And then you win that game, and I think there's a lot of pressure on Michigan to come into Mackey and hold up expectations. There will be most likely, almost most definitely, a number one next to their name. And I mean, we know how that building can get with a team like that coming in there. And, we've seen this Purdue team, I think, pull off more unlikely feats in Mackey Arena before. And it certainly wouldn't shock anyone if Purdue went into that game and won. And right after that, you've got Indiana, a game that I'm sure a lot of guys on this team are looking forward to. Braden especially, after kind of a rough showing in Bloomington. I just think this game is so big for getting your mojo back, because this is like a win's a win in Lincoln, like in a way that it really wasn't against Maryland and Oregon. Like, you're supposed to beat Maryland by 30. You're supposed to beat Oregon by 30, and you won by 4 at home. And we all talked about that Oregon game as if, like, oh my God, that was almost a loss. Like that was essentially a loss in everybody's minds, even though it counts as a win in the stat column. And to go on the road in Lincoln, there is none of that anymore. Like you just went on the road and you got a Big Ten win, and you took a Big Ten win, and that can't be understated. I don't think in a conference race this tight against a team like Nebraska, who's been who they've been all year.
I mean, putting this in the tournament picture too, on Bracket Matrix that was updated today, the day we're recording this, the 10th. So before Tuesday night's games, Purdue is the second 3 seed behind Kansas, ahead of Michigan State and Florida, and Nebraska was the last 2 seed. That's probably flipped. Purdue has the second most quad one wins in the country behind Duke with this Nebraska win. I mean, I have to check based on Tuesday night's action. If anyone else is tied, that gives Purdue 7 quad one games. The next, let me double check it where Indiana is in the net rankings, but I believe they're still 33. So of your remaining games, 5 are quad one, or sorry, 4 are quad one, and that Indiana game could easily move into quad one if they pick up another win or two between now and then. From a bracket standpoint, Purdue's right there. Now, this is the preseason number 1 team, and they would have to probably win out to make a serious push for a 1 seed, which is a little unrealistic. But a 2 seed is well in play, like you mentioned earlier, and if Purdue's probably trending towards that if they aren't already with this win, and you win 3 of the next 4, I think you're firmly on the 2 line with a much more favorable path to a Final Four. And that all started with this Nebraska technically comeback overtime win, where it looked like they had snatched defeat from the jaws of victory.
Yeah, and I mean, you look at this Nebraska win, and you look at the wins. Like if you look at the best win, kind of from these other top 10 KenPom teams, like a Nebraska road win is, I mean, I think you have to put, I think just like de facto, you have to put that Illinois win at Mackey over the Nebraska road win. But outside of that, there's not really many teams at the top of the sport with a win like at Nebraska. Like it's all, I think it's arguably on the level of a home win versus Arizona, like what Kansas has, because of that added factor of you didn't do it at home. You went on the road and did this. And like that can't be understated enough. Road wins are tough to come by against anybody, let alone top 10 teams. And Nebraska's a top 10 team. This is a Nebraska team that I don't think anybody should like be panicking on. This is a Nebraska team that still at the end of the day is 21-3, like, and very likely to make a second weekend, win their first ever programs tournament game ever. Like this is not a Nebraska team that you can shrug your shoulders at. This isn't your average Nebraska team, and that's just why it was so big to go into Lincoln to get a win like that tonight. And I'm kind of beating a drum a little bit at this point, but it can't be understated in my opinion.
Yeah, massive win for Purdue. That'll wrap it up for us in the recap. I think there's going to be a lot more Purdue future talk as we close down the rest of the regular season. We're fully into February. I mean, we're mid-February now. The Super Bowl's in the past. Football season's over. It is full-on basketball season for the sports world at large now. All eyes are going to be on college basketball as we are less than 6 weeks away from March Madness. So, exciting time to be a college basketball fan. Exciting time to be a Purdue fan. I know the vibes off that Nebraska win maybe weren't quite as high as they could have been, given how big a lead we had before we kind of lost it at the end there and gave everyone several heart attacks, maybe a few aneurysms, but they did win. Purdue will next take on Iowa in Carver Hawkeye Arena in Iowa City on Saturday, Valentine's Day basketball. So tell your significant others they can suck it, and you're going to be watching basketball because it's a pretty loaded slate for Valentine's Day. This is going to be a fun one, so we'll have a preview up on the channel for that, of course. So stay tuned, stick around, and we'll have you covered down the rest of Purdue's basketball season.